Hello, welcome to History of Religion, and we're going to be covering the first part of the first week, which is common features of basic religions in this video lecture. So we're going to start off with something called animism, and that is when nature is alive with the spirits that have personalities, feelings, and will interact with humans. So in other words, the tree, the leaves, the sun, the moon, the rocks, they all have a spirit living inside of them, kind of like a Pocahontas movie. So these spirits have the ability to bless or curse humans. Every element on earth, including the earth itself, has the potential to be worshipped. And you have to remember, back in the days where these kinds of elements of religion were being developed, society relied so heavily on nature, and yet we had no idea how nature actually worked. And it was nature who became the force in the universe that gave us the ability to survive or would potentially kill us. So we saw as early humans the power of nature, and because we were beholden to nature, we realized we had to worship those things that are in nature. Now today, we still have some animism going on. Modern man will engage in worship, for example, with Christmas trees. I don't care how many times you read the Bible, there's nothing in there about Christmas trees. And again, one of those things that we're going to be talking about in the class is how to get people to join a religion, you have to make them feel comfortable with it. Before Christianity, the primary religions were pagan, essentially, and pagans essentially worship nature. So consequently, to make people feel comfortable with this new religion, it's a matter of giving them something that they already feel comfortable with. And you see the same thing with the Easter Bunny. You know, again, when Jesus was crucified on the cross, there are no Easter bunnies running around. And yet, that is one of the dominant signs at Easter. And again, it comes from this idea that the early pagans, to get them to convert to Christianity, you had to give them the symbols that they are comfortable with. And Easter bunnies are a symbol of fertility, of making babies. Now, if you look at the modern day idea of a New Age religion, they come from the idea that all spiritual power comes from nature. So even though you can go 10,000 years and look at how animism evolved, it is still rocking and rolling today. Now, because we know how important nature is, you need people who can control nature. And in the, again, early days, there were societies, they had what they called magicians. In the Bible, they're called magi. So if you have heard that word before, it is a way of controlling nature for the benefit of society or to punish their enemies. Today, we still look at magic as being fairly important in how we do things. Imitative or sympathetic magic is where the act desired is created on a small scale. And over here you'll see we have a voodoo doll. So we get a little bit of clothing from our ex, we make a voodoo doll, and then we stab the heck out of it because we hate our ex. Another thing that a lot of us do today is what's known as fetish magic. And this is a good luck charm. The person who holds the quote-unquote fetish is brought good fortune by it, and it prevents evil that could be done to us. And here's a rabbit's foot. Some of us carry a coin or a little emblem that means something to us. Some Catholics used to carry rosaries in their coat pockets. All of us have that special thing we call our good luck token. You know, some athletes consider their socks or underwear their magic weapon against losing. So it doesn't have to make any sense. It's just the idea that it's a good luck charm. We have imbued it with value. Then we have something called divination, and this is the ability to predict the future. And it was often conducted by priests or what we call oracles, the most famous oracle, of course, being the oracle at Delphi in ancient Greece. And there's various ways that they used to do this. They can examine animal entrails, where they would take an animal like a pig and they would slice open its belly, and the way that the intestines came out were what the priest needed to be able to read the future. They also looked at the flight of birds. Now think about it. You're a magi, and you are supposed to predict the future in terms of nature. Well, you see flocks and flocks of birds flying south. This is a way to say to the people around you, it's going to get cold this soon. And again, it's a matter of really understanding the patterns and trends in nature, which allowed magi their true power. They also look at things like casting of sacred dice. In some cultures, they would smoke a peace pipe, or they would inhale intoxicants to take them to a new level of reality, or at least their perception of reality. In the Bible, especially in the Old Testament, the prophets are the ones who reveal God's message to the masses. So over here we have Moses with the Ten Commandments. This is Daniel in the lion's den. And again, the idea here is that they are telling the future. They're telling what God wants us to know. The word shaman, which is used probably as frequently as any other word like oracle is used these days, was developed in Siberia, and it means someone who is possessed by spirits and spoke their messages to the group. Again, just a way of being able to predict or imbue messages from the other world. And this is a turn of the century picture, turn of the century being from the 1800s to the 1900s, of a shaman in Siberia. And again, what they would do is they use horns and animal fur to represent their strength of mind. Another element of basic religion is taboo. These are the actions that must be avoided, or the spirit world will harm the person or the group. In basic societies, holy places and holy men were considered taboo and were to be avoided or not touched except at special times of the year. In ancient Greece, Athena, who is the goddess of wisdom and war, she had Vestal virgins monitoring her temples, and they were not to be touched. That's why they were called virgins. They were not to be touched by any man, and so consequently they had that special status in society. Today, in many religions, women who have their period are forced to live apart from the group or go through a ritualistic bath to cleanse themselves. Some religions prevent women from praying during their menstrual cycles. This is a picture, by the way, of a cleansing ritual bath that is used in Orthodox Jewish ceremonies for women who need to be purified after their periods. And this is a Vestal virgin, so don't touch. In the Bible, taboos are all over. One of the most famous one is in Samuel, and it tells the story of a man who touched the Ark of the Covenant only to prevent it from falling, and he was immediately struck dead by God. So here is one of the old style pictures of the Ark of the Covenant, and of course in one of my favorite movies, Raiders of the Lost Ark, when the Nazis go to open the Ark, their faces melt, which is pretty cool. Anyway, so taboos really are representative of the power that humans cannot control. We also see taboos in what we eat. Certain kinds of foods are considered taboo, especially pork, beef, and shellfish. Jews and Muslims see pork as unclean, and part of that is, and again, you have to go back 2,000 years ago, we are not looking at high-tech food preparation environments. we're talking about cooking over an open fire. And a lot of times food will burn on the outside before it's cooked all the way through. Now, when you put a piece of beef on the fire and it burns on the outside and it's red on the inside, you can still eat that. But with pork, if you do that, you will have little worms crawling around in your belly, and nobody likes that. So historically, a lot of anthropologists feel that this admonition against pork was based on the idea that it was very hard to cook all the way through. On the other hand, Hindus see the cow as sacred. They believe that cows are one of the highest points of being, and again, we're not seeing it as a danger, but as something to be worshipped. The highest level of society in India's Hindu nation are called Brahmins, and that's another word for a bull or a cow. And then up until recently, Catholics did not eat any meat on Fridays until the Pope said it was okay because it was thought to be a sacrifice to give up to Jesus. Now, one of the other things that has become such an important part of today's society that we don't realize that it truly started with religion is something called totems. These are items that identify a connection between a person or tribe and an animal or force of nature, like the sun. And up here you'll see for the Native Americans, they have bear totems, which are very popular because they symbolize ferocious strength. And you'll see in multiple societies, in multiple pagan religions, this idea of bears being this symbol of ultimate strength. Modern nations are identified with totems such as an eagle or a lion. And of course, in the United States, we have the eagle. Humorously, Ben Franklin had wanted the turkey to be the American symbol because he felt that that was a much better animal to represent the United States. And aside from the humor in all of that, cooler heads prevailed and the eagle became our national symbol. And then also, if you look at teams, doesn't matter, baseball, football, soccer, all of those, use totems as mascots to symbolize their spirit. And of course, we know that the Eagles and their inability to fly high for more than a couple of games in a row. But you can look at, like the Chicago Bears and the Los Angeles Rams. Those are all supposed to inspire strength, wisdom, brute force, all of those things that are trying to be communicated via this symbolic totem. Another important element in basic religion, and it still is valuable to this day, is what we call sacrifice. It is used to persuade a god to act in a particular way, kind of, I'll scratch your back if you scratch my back. It establishes a communal bond between the spirit world and the human world. It has to be something important. It can't be those can of beans sitting in the back of your closet that you donate to the food drive because you just want to get them out of your pantry. It has to be something really valuable. So it was usually a food item or a weapon, something that was important. And up here you'll see a ram, a male sheep being sacrificed because that is a food item, and that was very important to the community. No one wasted food. You didn't go to the local fast food joint and get a supersized fries and then throw out half of them. This was in the days when every single part of an animal was eaten or used for clothing. They used the fat to make candles, and as a consequence, this was a big deal to sacrifice. Human sacrifice is rare. But when it was used, it was either as an enemy taken prisoner or a beloved child or young person. And here you see the traditional young female virgin being sacrificed. And again, these are very important because, that young female virgin represents the potential and future of the tribe or community. She is the future mother of children in this community, and to sacrifice her is one of the great sacrifices that a community can make. You see a lot of human sacrifice in South America, especially amongst the Mochi of ancient Peru and the Aztec. And they used human sacrifice on a regular basis. This is a Mochi warrior figurine, and they used human sacrifice so much that they actually created representations of how they did that. In Southeast Asia, places like Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos, headhunting was very popular, and it was a way to ensure good crops. You would take the head of your enemy and you would put it on a spike in your front of your establishment of your house, and that was a way to say to God, I am worshiping you by giving you more souls. Another element that most of us are pretty familiar with is the concept of myth. And that's not to say that if you believe that Muhammad met the Archangel Gabriel in the cave, or that Jesus was crucified and reborn or brought back to life by God. If you don't believe those are myths, I'm not trying to say they're myths. What I'm saying is that there is a story behind all religions, whether you believe in that particular religion or not. And these stories are how humans interact with the gods. What it does is it gives concrete images to abstract ideas. And essentially they explain how and why of the world. One of the most popular myths of all time is the Greek myth of Prometheus. Prometheus explains the origin of fire. He is a Greek hero who defies the gods and steals fire to give to the humans. So he brings the fire to the humans. And Zeus, the king of the gods, punishes him by shackling him to a rock and sending his eagle down to eat Prometheus's liver every day, only to have it grow back every night. So his punishment is eternal torment, until, of course, he's rescued by the hero Hercules. So here's some representations of Prometheus in art. Here he is with fire, bringing it to humans. This is him shackled to the rock. There's the eagle chewing away at his liver. And here's another picture of him shackled to the rock with the eagle about to land. So, this is a way of showing the community or the people of their time. An ancient Greek's rise is about 2,500 years ago, where fire came from. Now, archaeologists have been able to use carbon dating to identify about 500,000 years ago is when humans harnessed the power of fire. That was not something that was easily discernible 2,500 years ago. So instead, the Greeks made up this myth to explain how fire was brought to humans. We also see ritual, very important in terms of ancient religion, basic religion, and modern religion. These are the rites and ceremonies of a religion. For example, some of us pray at our mealtime. We reenact mythologies or stories such as the birth of Christ or the Last Supper. At Christmas time when we go to church, we'll see the baby Jesus with Joseph and Mary and all the animals and the three wise men who were magi, by the way. And that is not meant to reenact precisely the moment, but it's a symbol. It's a moment that we are honoring. It's the same thing when you are a Christian and you take communion. It is a representation of the Last Supper. And these actions demonstrate how devotees identify with these divine actions. One of the major elements in all religions is this concept of rites of passage. These are certain rituals that occur at key transitional points in the life of a person. They symbolize separation from the former status and transition to the new status. And really, transition is what we're really focusing in on here. The most common eras of transition: when we're born, when we start puberty, when we get married, and when we die. So for birth, In Jewish families, boys are circumcised. In the United States, most children, male children that is, are circumcised at birth. And it's mostly for health reasons. It is something that in the last 30 years, with the advent of HIV and AIDS, has been understood that it is a much cleaner, safer alternative, because the HIV virus can live under the uncircumcised skin on a man's penis. In Christianity, baptism is part of welcoming the child into the church. In puberty, Native Americans go on what we call a vision quest, where they live apart from their families and fast. Interestingly, when you fast for a few days, 3 or 4 days, you begin to hallucinate. So, they believe, anthropologists believe, that this vision quest is partly due to the fact that these kids are beginning to hallucinate from not having anything to eat. In some African tribes, the child is scarred to mark their transition to adulthood. And here you see very elaborate scarring. In most modern-day African tribes that still use this technique, they only use 1 or 2 lines across the cheek to represent their transition. Christian youth are confirmed, or at least Catholic kids are confirmed at 14, and Jewish youth go through a bar bat mitzvah, welcoming them into the adult responsibilities of Judaism. Of course, when we get married, we go through the big ceremony, whether it's at City Hall or on the beach or at a church. And then, of course, when we die, there's the whole funeral and we mourn. Jewish people sit Shiva, which is a grief period, and there are a variety of different death rituals, which we'll talk about as we talk about each of the religions and their historical concepts. One of the big things that we still do today is called Ancestor Veneration. Originally, this was the worship of deceased family members. And the theory is that ancient man would dream of his deceased family, and that led him to believe that the dead were not truly gone, but lived on in another world or in another form. And again, you have to think back 7, 8, 9,000 years ago. Early man had no concept of sleep cycle and REM cycles and any of that. They might dream most often of chasing an animal in a hunt or interacting with their family. But when someone that was important to them showed up in their dreams, it did logically make sense that this person existed in another realm. It evolves into the belief that the dead can either hurt or harm the living, so the concept of veneration began. The ancient Chinese would memorize the name and history of their dead ancestor to placate the spirits. And others would leave offerings every year at the gravesite of their dead family, such as flowers or blankets, something that we still do today. We go to the cemetery on Mother's Day or Father's Day if one of our parents has passed away. We go on Memorial Day. There's various times that we go to the cemetery as a way to remember and honor those people who have passed that still mean a lot to us. We're not so worried that they're going to come back and haunt us, but I'm sure some of us are a little concerned about that.